Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
welcome to our webinar. I'll give you just a couple of moments to connect, join, and get settled. It's always maybe a little frustrating for the people who are just there on time, but we want to make sure that everybody gets to see it in the full length. So again, a warm welcome to everybody joining this webinar about a very important topic, and that is how to measure candidate experience and how to analyze candidate experience with Start and Greenhouse. So we are a customer preferred partner with Greenhouse already for quite some time, and we're going to show you how it works, what the platform offers you, and how the solution is helping your candidate experience improve. So, first of all, I want to introduce my colleague Thomas Robert, who is going to demo you this all in just a matter of minutes. I am Mark Berendsen, and I'm CRO and co-founder of Start. Please know that you can get in touch with us very easily. You can book a demo and reach out to Thomas. The contact details will be shared in the chat, as well as other resources and links to interesting stuff that we will share when we touch on that very subject in the chat. So keep an eye out on that. If you have any questions during the demo, just drop them in the question section, which you see on the right hand below, and we'll definitely touch on your questions later on after the demo or even during the demo. And also, you can count on us to be on time within 30 minutes, so ending before the bottom of the hour. So you'll be on time for your next engagement. That were like the household rules. And I want to tell you about our mission at Start. Our mission is to make the voice of the candidate heard in recruitment. We feel that hasn't been the case that much in the past, and it should be that the candidate is heard because of well, you should do that anyhow, but especially now since the labor market is so tight. So the focus should very well be on the candidate. And at Start, we work for a large variety of companies, mostly tech scale-ups. You see a list here on the slide, but also for large corporations like Danone, like Coca-Cola, like Ledbrooks. And what they have in common is that they care a lot about candidate experience, but want to improve that in a data-driven fashion. And that's where we can help. So I want to tell you why I think and we think it's so important to start measuring and analyzing your candidate experience, but how to do that better than talking about an actual client case. So I want to introduce you to a company called Elastic, a pretty well-known company. It's a tech company with a worldwide presence, employing 2,600 people roundabout. So they are very focused on their candidate experience. And that has always been a big focus. But when they got in negative reviews on, for example, Glassdoor, they wanted to find out more and understand the underlying issues. But that was so difficult. So they started experimenting with a tool like SurveyMonkey to get feedback, and that was manually. So that was a lot of work, and it didn't offer the insights on which they could really improve their candidate experience. So they turned to Start, and actually, I want to show you what they accomplished. So Start allowed them to tell a much larger story. A lot of what's happening with candidates didn't always involve recruiters. It's much broader. So with the in-depth feedback from candidates, they were able to identify the issues and tell that story back to the business and to other stakeholders. And as a result, they've increased their what we call CNPS. That's the Candidate Net Promoter Score, with 11 points just within the first 6 months on rejected candidates. And they gained tremendous efficiencies because of the automation. So that saved them a lot of manual work, which was ongoing. And finally, one of the improvements they made was launching a dedicated interviewer training program, because they found that their interviewers were not that skilled, were quite junior, and so they've launched a training program which really helped increase that candidate experience, and in a measurable way, because what you don't measure is very hard to improve. So to sort of summarize why we feel it's really important to start to measure and analyze your candidate experience. First of all, of course, with the integration with Greenhouse, first of all, to improve, first of all, measure and then improve your candidate experience based on facts, based on the very stage that you measure your candidate experience in the application funnel. Secondly, coach your recruiters, of course, but not just your recruiters, also the other people in the business, interviewers, hiring managers, etc. Then thirdly, boost your brand. So not just your employer brand. I mean, that's the first you would talk about, being a recruiter. But think about the cases where your candidate is also your client. And there are quite interesting studies done about the impact a poor candidate experience could have on your revenue, on your bottom line. So that's a serious issue. Also, we could go beyond just candidate experience and give you insights as to how your inclusive hiring is going. So talk about diversity and inclusion. We could also measure quality of hire. And finally, and that touches again on the internal piece, so the relationship and the partnership between the business and the talent acquisition function. So the internal partnership. How do they appreciate each other's contribution in the process of hiring top talent? Finally, and that's very clear, the integration allows you to automate tasks that would save hours every week for people that can be so much more productive in other ways. So let us not wait any longer and dive into the solution itself. And I want to hand over to Thomas. Thomas, you're still muted. So.
Sorry, it seemed there was something in the way. But anyways, thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And yeah, without further ado, I'll show you a little bit about STARD. Quickly on the agenda, we've got the candidate side of things. So we're going to look at the invitation, as we can see here from the email. Then we're going to dive into a survey example. But of course, we're going to spend time into looking at how those surveys are sent. So the automation with your ATS. And once we've looked at how they're sent, how they're automated, then of course, we want to see how that data is presented, how those dashboard looks, and what kind of insights you can expect. So that's the agenda. And so I'll take us right into this invitation. And of course, it should be very recognizable, Coca-Cola. But of course, it would be just as recognizable to your candidates because they've, of course, just applied to your position, to your company. So they would recognize your logo and also maybe the face because we can set it to be the last person they spoke to or a more senior member of the team, just with the idea that, hey, we care about your feedback. So please do respond. Now, everything you see in this email is customizable, this little intro or outro, and down to the very color of these buttons. And we also want to personalize the email, of course, so that the candidate really does feel like we are emailing them. And so here we've inserted first name, role, and location as an example. And of course, this is pulled from your ATS, so you don't have to worry about those just going over each email. Now, we asked the very first question in the email because that just increases response rates by a lot. And this question, you might recognize it. It's the Net Promoter Score question, or the CNPS, as Mark mentioned. So it's how likely is it that you would recommend us? And as soon as they click on the answer that they want to answer, it'll pull out the very full survey. Good to mention here that if they don't want to actually answer the full survey and just wanted to do this question, we'll save this answer for you when they close the tab. And what you can see here is that, of course, we're still very much on brand. We have different language options. We have different anonymity options, just to make sure that you have everything you need. And as I'm scrolling through, we can already see that this survey is dynamic, because here it says what makes us a 9, but if we score a 4, what can we improve? And if it's a 10, of course, recognizing the fact that we are great, but we recognize that, there's always room to improve. As I'm scrolling through, of course, we have lots of quantitative questions, because those are the ones that make really nice dashboards and averages. But we also know that when it comes to comments and improvement, then sometimes some qualitative feedback is needed as well. And so we always leave room for people to write responses. Now, I'm not spending a lot of time on the specific questions, and that's because ultimately it's your organization, it's your recruitment funnel, and you are the one that's going to pick which questions you want to ask. And so when you are onboarded, you create your survey completely by yourself so that you get to pick the right questions. But nevertheless, we're not forcing candidates to answer every question as I skip through here. And that's because what we want is for them to submit their answers. And if we force them to answer every question, then we risk them just entering random data, which ultimately isn't going to be productive for us. And when they are happy with their answers, they can simply submit the survey, and they're first taken to this dynamic thank you page. And it's dynamic because, as I mentioned before, it recognizes the Net Promoter Score. And here, because we're a promoter with a 10, then it's going to prompt us to write a review. And this button is already linked to a Glassdoor page so that it can be really easy for the candidate to write a really great review about the process. And of course, if they're a detractor, so scoring 6 or below, we don't want them to go on Glassdoor. And so we won't have that same page. And in fact, what we'll do is we'll send a sort of firefighter email out to the right person in your organization saying, hey, Thomas, he didn't have such a great experience. Maybe you want to circle back with him and make sure that his feedback is heard so that you can improve your process. Now, I will just finish off on the candidate side of things, saying, of course, we have a library of templates looking at all of the different stages that we measure. So, for example, interview, we can see this rejected after interview stage. And when we preview it, we already see that we're mobile compatible because we know people, often answer their emails on their phone. Now, I will go into the automation, which we have here. And because, of course, now that we've looked at the surveys, we want to make sure how are they sent to the right person at the right time. And so we have Starred Connect here, and we have all of the ATSs which we connect with. And, we'll pick the right one. And at first, it would just say connect when you first log on. But once you click connect, it'll just ask you to copy paste some tokens. And within a couple minutes or even seconds, actually, our systems are speaking to each other, and you can now start creating these workflows. So here we have a lot of example workflows. So already candidate rejected after application review, rejected after phone screen, face-to-face interview, or withdrawn, etc. But when we look after inside of a face-to-face interview, we can already see that they're made of very standard business rule. There's a trigger, there's a filter, and an action. This action here is just us telling Greenhouse, okay, go get the job. But what you need to worry about is this trigger where you're telling Greenhouse to pull that data after they have been rejected. And then the filter is where you can get quite granular with how you're sending the different surveys. For example, if you want to send a survey to engineering after they had an assessment, but you want to send another survey to finance who didn't have an assessment, then of course you can do this here. So for example, I pick department, department name is, and now I can do finance to pick, for example, someone who did not have an assessment. And so ultimately they had a different interviewing process. And so it makes sense to send them a different survey. Now, I'll just mention here that, of course, anything that is a token in Greenhouse, we pull it, and therefore you can create a filter out of it. And so if you want to send different surveys to different locations in different languages, then this is where you set that filter. And finally, if it makes it through the filter, then it triggers the action. And so in the action, of course, there's the scheduling of the invitation or the sending immediately. But since this is an after interview, after a rejection, then we're going to schedule it because the last thing we want is for them to get rejected via email and then a reminder that they got rejected plus a question like, hey, rate us. So we'll leave it to 2 days here. And then we can pick the right survey template. We can also pick the right email template and the language in which it's sent in. But as I scroll through, you'll see we also have a reminder in case they don't fill out the first time, maybe they'll do it the second time. And where I'll spend a little bit more time is explaining these custom fields. And the reason these are important and I think rather interesting is because this is you telling Stard that you want to pull this data from your ATS in order to pair it with the experience data so that when you go into your dashboards, you can actually create different filterings on these different tokens. So for example, if I want to create different, if I want to filter on the office or on the recruiter, or here it says rejection type, you'll see that I can do that. And just quickly, when I go into the fields, different options of fields, as I scroll through, hopefully this is familiar to you because it should be tokens that come directly from Greenhouse. And I think this will be even more clear when I go into the dashboard, where already you have all of the different kinds of filters that we have. And before I touch more on the filters, I just want to briefly touch on the fact that here we've got our different kinds of dashboards. So we've got the quality of hire, which helps you predict attrition rates. You've got the hiring manager dashboards so that you can help the partnership with the recruitment team and the hiring managers. And of course, we've got our diversity, equity, and inclusion dashboards so that you can see just really how inclusive is your hiring process. By the way, for the DE&I dashboard, we don't send an extra questionnaire. We just pair it with your existing EEOC questions, and on top of that, add an extra layer of filtering. But of course, this is a candidate experience focused. So I'm just going to do our normal dashboard, not the diversity one or the hiring manager one. And back to the filters, we can already see how we can filter on the different departments, on the different locations, the hiring manager, recruiter, etc. Once again, if it's a token in Greenhouse, then it's a token that we pull and we can create a filter on. Now, as I scroll down, we can see already data relating to the survey. So, number of responses, the total response rates. Here we see our overall CNPS, but more interesting is actually to divide it between hired, rejected, and withdrawn. And you'll see there's varying scores here. So with the 67, 44, and 4. But it's interesting to note that, of course, most of the responses come from rejected, and that's because most of the people going through your funnel ultimately get rejected. And it's also where there's the lowest net promoter score. Now, as I scroll down, I can actually see the average scores of the questionnaire. So these are all of the questions that we asked, and these are now the average scores that we collected. And if I scroll a little bit lower, then I can see the qualitative comments that were made next to these questions. So if I scroll up and I look at these questions, I see that out of all of these questions, it seems that preparation of interview was the lowest scoring one. So I can click on this and it'll now filter the data based on this very question alone. So preparation of interview. And as I scroll down now, I can go see the qualitative comment that were left because of this. And we see hardly any prep. There was no interview. So already it's good insight that you know you can improve on this. Now, as I scroll down, we'll also see some more data. So this is going to be comments relating to the very first question, the net promoter score question. And here we don't see it because it's still filtering out the other question. There we go. Now we've got that data. And as I scroll down, we can start getting now an idea of the different kinds of dashboards that we can build. And I say build because it's really on your specification. Depending on what you need, we can build it. And I'll pause on this one because it's quite interesting, the application response time, where sometimes we have a bias towards thinking faster is better. But here it turns out that actually faster, there's a negative NPS here. So 4 to 5 weeks, that seems to be the sweet spot, at least for this candidate sample pool. And yes, we have source, which is of course very interesting, especially when it comes to referrals, where you want to make sure that the colleagues that are referring their friends, well, those friends aren't getting a bad experience and then telling their friend again, like, hey, why did you recommend this to me? And of course, these are all ones that we can build, but the ones that I'll spend a little bit more time on is this priority matrix. And I'm going to select rejection after interview, so let it filter there. And as it filters, I'll say that we are able to prioritize things within your recruitment funnel by correlating the very first question of the NPS to the individual questions that you ask in the survey. And so based on how correlated they are to one another, we put it in this priorities list, and you're able to see what are you able to focus on today to start improving your recruitment funnel. And so this is a different kinds of insight, because this isn't just filtering some of the raw data, but actually giving you actionable insight. And so here it seems that preparation of interview is the number one thing, which is also the question that we saw earlier. And it's a great insight because this is the thing that you know you can focus on as an organization to create those promoters. Whereas 2 and 3, those are things that are really driving your promoter scores. And as a recruitment team, you know you can keep going with. Now we've zoomed in a lot into the rejection after interview priorities matrix, but now we can zoom out a little bit by looking at the people journey. And the people journey here, we can also call it a little bit the management summary, where you can see the amount of surveys sent, response rate, and number of comments received in the last 30 days. And also what you can see a little bit below is a more holistic view of your recruitment funnel. And we do that by showing you your NPS in the light blue or green, and a darker blue is the benchmark. So you can actually compare your recruitment funnel in comparison to all of our different clients. And of course, here we have the journey types, and here we have the net promoter score. And what you just saw is that we have different filterings as well. So we have the different regions, company size, and company industry. So for example, if I want to look at information technology, now we can click there. It shows a different benchmark. Now I can click at the interview touch points. And when I scroll below, I actually see more in-depth data in regards to the NPS distribution. So with the promoters, with the detractors, and it seems here there's more detractors, so we're doing well. However, there's also a lower response rate, so maybe we want to work on that a little bit as well. So as I finish off here, I just want to remind everyone that I'm super happy to jump on a call and have a conversation about this, our platform. There's so much more to show, so much more to talk about. But with that, I'll hand the floor over back to Mark, who's going to take it away with some key takeaways.
Yes, before I'll wrap it up, I want to stress a couple of things. First of all, just point out that in the chat function, there's a couple of resources that we've shared. First of all, the Elastic case I talked about. There's also the survey templates that are actually on a public page, so you can familiarize yourself with the best-in-class questions to ask at a specific stage. So after phone screen, after interview, when a candidate has withdrawn, for every stage in the funnel, there is a ready-made survey template. Finally, we just shared also the benchmark reports. By the way, this is the first half of 2021. We're very busy compiling our 2021 total year data, and that will be released shortly, second week of February, we expect. So watch that space. Let's quickly recap measuring and analyzing candidate experience with Start and Greenhouse. Basically, it's asking for feedback in an automated fashion. As you've seen, you can really go granular in defining those workflows, never have to do any manual work again. Secondly, be really specific in the email you're going to send to your candidates. They feel it as very relevant, very personal. It has some, maybe job details or location information. And it also doesn't say, hey, go to the research, or do you want to fill out a survey? No, we just ask them for their opinion, and people, I can guarantee you, will want to give their opinion after they have been in the process of applying with your company. We see very high response rates. And so that's the part of the respondent. And then you go into the measuring, and as you've seen, we give you this just total overview of your applicant journey and the scores you have there versus the benchmark in your particularly organization size, region, or industry. And there's more. There's obviously also the priority matrix, which is one of the most actionable insights that we can offer, really giving you the issues that are most likely to move the needle on the total Net Promoter Score, let's say the overall opinion people have about your process. So that is one of the most powerful insights that you can actually filter on a recruiter level, department level, whatever level you want to filter on. And those filters are all based on what we pull out of your greenhouse. Now we go a step further, and that is also, and I want to stress this again, for example, on inclusive hiring. Now, in the company, we actually say 2022 is the year of the candidate. It's half jokingly because every year should be about the candidate. But I would say this year, particularly as the labor market is so tight and the search for talent is so difficult, actually. But there's another element to it, and that's, of course, building a diverse organization. And to build a diverse organization, you need to hire inclusively. And to hire inclusively, you have to measure some metrics. So we can combine, as Thomas was saying, the EEOC question data set with the candidate experience that demographic groups have had, and that's a very powerful insight. Just want to mention that, and that's something that we can show when we talk to you. So that's something that we would encourage to reach out and schedule a demo and have a further conversation. Let me check if there are any questions for the last 2 minutes of this webinar. I saw a question earlier that's in the chat, maybe. There was in the chat indeed. So the question is how to involve hiring managers. There are a couple of things to say. First of all, you can also measure internal partnerships. So send a survey to the hiring manager as to how the partnership was perceived, just to fill that vacancy. Also, we feel it's really important to explain, what you're going to do in terms of building the structure of measuring. And they will be part of the scoring. So ultimately, a hiring manager gets a score as well. And I feel as soon as someone gets feedback, they'll be super involved. And of course, it's not a thing purely that sits in talent acquisition. It's the whole company that's actually involved in recruitment. And this will only strengthen that case to make you more strategic function as talent acquisition. So we promised to end on time. So I think we are just there. I want to thank you for joining us today. I wish you a very great rest of your day and hopefully a very successful year in recruitment, and looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.